the number one most Googled thing is, what time is the Super Bowl? And so they realized that they could get fuckloads of traffic if they just made an article called if they made an article called "What time's the Super Bowl?" and then the article just says what time the Super Bowl is.
Butterscotch
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 472 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm the artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's June 14th, 22x4. Before we get started, we have a warning. Now, there's going to be profanity on this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your monthly donations to help keep this podcast going. So we're just really in the trenches right now, just jamming on Crashlands 2. We're moving, we're blazing.
We're really
at
jamming.
a pace that's frankly painful. I think we need some ablative shielding or something to help us.
We've gone plaid.
From burning in the atmosphere. But you know what? We're determined to get this game done and have it be the highest quality possible. And that just takes work. Mm-hmm. So we're just kind of grinding forward on that stuff. We got some really cool story developments and all kinds of things. But you know what? Too bad. You're just going to have to wait until you play it.
Yep. You can still get a glimpse though of what we're up to if you go get the demo, because it's up on Steam. But we're going to be talking about it. But just in case you forgot or you're new to the podcast, etc., you can just head over to Steam, look for Crashlands 2, download the demo, play it.
It'll be right there.
It's right there.
So the demo is like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So kind of like the very, very early stuff in the game. And that's kind of something we wanted to talk a little bit about today of like how that's been going, because Steam Nextfest started, which is the whole reason we made the demo, was so that we could participate in Steam Nextfest. And so Nextfest started on June 10th, which was Monday of this week. And we've done quite a lot of stuff kind of prepping for it, right? So we made the demo and we released that in early
May 21st.
May 21.
Mid-May.
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago. And around that time, we also had Crashlands in the Survival Crafting Fest.
That started on May 27th, I believe.
Yeah. So we kind of silently launched the demo in the sense that like we put it up, but we didn't do anything crazy of like, ad spend or, big promotions or anything. We just put it up on the page to kind of prepare for Steam Next Fest, which is when we kind of thought that was when like a bunch of that was when the demo would actually get visibility. But we miscalculated on that a little bit, which we'll talk about.
Well, the full sequence of things that happened, because now that we're on the other side of it, that we can just kind of talk about all of it. But
because nothing's coming up now, it's all done.
Because I think it'll be interesting to do a two-part. I wanted to talk about what we did and why we thought it made sense, and then retrospectively what turned out to happen, and what we learned from that. So the idea was to say, well, we don't want to just launch the demo at the peak of when things are supposed to be happening, because what if we fuck something up? What if we need to do some fixes? We don't want that to happen. So we wanted to basically soft launch it. We want to get it out a little early, right? And we were kind of pushing everything towards the idea of like the more wish lists we can already have, the more people playing the game, etc. By the time we get to Nextfest, then the higher up in those lists that will be when it starts. And because everything in the algorithms in all the stores is a positive or negative feedback loop, right? So
they typically seem to look at things like velocity, which is if you launch a game and you're making a lot of sales all the time, then Steam will be like, oh, lots of people are buying this game right now.
Let's show it to more people.
We're going to show it to more people. So it's a positive feedback loop that way. But then there's also kind of like a lifetime thing where if
lots of people
large numbers
have bought it.
Yeah, if a lot of people have bought it, then even if the current velocity of sales isn't that high, you're still going to be more likely to be shown over a game that hasn't sold that many copies, right? And it's a zero-sum game. Like, there's only so many places people can see games on Steam.
And if one person's game is there, then yours can't be.
Then yours won't be. Yeah. And so it's all about that, like trying to figure out ways to game that algorithm to edge out some other games so that your game gets seen compared to somebody else.
We typically think about this. It's similar in line with how we talked about our precedent versus stuff like that in the past, which is this idea of essentially like a roll up or a snowball rolling down a hill, which is all these efforts always start relatively small. And then if you sequence them properly, then you kind of roll one into the next one and use the momentum you get from that initial thing to basically arrive at some point where ideally the momentum that you have by that point puts you in some position to then get even more momentum, right? So coming into the next fest, our idea was that, one, we already have the demo cut and it'd be nice to be able to use that soon. Two, with kind of where we're looking at as far as launch and all that, our anticipation was that if we can really nail the next fest, then we can essentially get enough total like size of the wish list pool for Crashlands 2 that maybe the sort of enduring tail of interest and the enduring algorithmic push that Steam would give us from that would, in the sum of however long it is until launch, essentially do far better than if we waited until maybe, I don't know, like October or something like that for the final possible opportunity for a next fest. So that was the idea behind it, which was basically to say, let's see if we can just shoot a really big shot here and set ourselves up to essentially kind of coast on a long tail of interest in the game post next fest. So then it was, how do we arrive? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was soft launch the demo so we can work out any kinks, go into the crafting fest while putting original Crashlands on a very steep sale, steepest it's ever been on. Mm-hmm. So it was 90% off. And
we link to Crashlands 2 from within Crashlands 1.
Yeah, so within game, there's a button that pops, or the button on the main menu, I think, where you can like click it and it'll pull up the Steam overlay to the Crashlands 2 store page, so you can wishlist the game right there. So it's the slickest possible way to make that happen, right? And we had a franchise sale page so that we would, the sale for Crashlands 1 would actually just directly show you Crashlands 2. Also, I think on the Crashlands 1 store page, we show you the widget for Crashlands 2. Do we? Is that a thing we're allowed to do?
There's a bunch of things. There's like a bunch.
There's like a bundle. There's a bunch of stuff. So we're doing like all this cross promo, and like we have a game out, so we could put it in that first fest, put it on a huge sale, and then try to get like the cross promo from that.
Yes,
that was that thing. And then we had
to do the timeline. You got May 21st was the demo soft launch. May 27th is Open World Crafting Fest to start. June 3rd then was the daily deal, which was that franchise sale, which basically was
Crashlands was already on sale. But that was the daily deal where it gets shown on the front page of Steam and all of that.
Yeah. So the idea there is like, okay, we managed to get then these three big moments in a way where we're fully prepared on the demo side. We've been had time to work out the kinks before we hit Next Fest, which theoretically would be a lot more demo downloads than anything else. And on top of that, the combined interest of in theory, this Open World Crafting Fest plus this daily deal and this ongoing sale should make it so that by the time we arrive at the time of the next fest, we're as juiced as we can be. You know what I mean? Like that's all the levers we got. We did a ballyhoo. We did the usual sort of like all of the stuff all the levers that we could possibly.
The ballyhoo is our newsletter, so that went out also during Next Fest.
Yeah,
and we did some YouTube ad spending, so we also were trying to drive traffic from YouTube. So pull out all the stops.
We did like the video game version of we took a really big pre-workout shake, and now Steam Next Fest was us trying to hit our 1 rep max on bench,
or basically. The video game equivalent of like you saved all your cool buff potions and stuff, for some boss fight. This was sort of like
those rejuvenation potions,
Yep. So I think what's interesting to talk about is then what happened.
Yeah.
After.
Well, I would say so. The lesson learned. So basically, it all went well. But when we're talking about Next Fest, or really any Steam, kind of fest thing, right? The two questions are: is how visible is the festival? So that first festival that we were in didn't look like it really did much, but also we weren't placed that highly in it. So it's kind of hard to say.
And again, this is weird because we're trying to promote Crashlands 2
through Crashlands 1. Yeah.
Through Crashlands 1, but because we can't put Crashlands 2 into Survival Crafting Fest because it's not out.
Well, it was in there. It was in there, but it's not the fest is focused on sales. It's not focused on demos.
So demos don't really go up, but also in that festival because it's not focused on new titles, right?
Correct.
It's all titles, which means we're up there with all of the biggest crafting games that have ever been created for the last 20 years or whatever, right? So that wasn't a space where much was going to happen, kind of inevitably, right? So the two questions for participation in these kind of things are how visible is the thing itself, and then how visible can you be? How visible can you be inside of it, right? And so something like Next Fest, that actually is the place where it's really competitive and getting increasingly competitive with each Next Fest as people get used to the idea of having to cut a demo, and as there are just always more games coming out, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, your competition there doesn't include games that are out.
Yeah, which is it's huge.
Yeah, it's only games that are not out and that where the developers have been able to put a demo together, right? So it dramatically cuts down competition for eyeballs on your stuff so that you actually have a chance to kind of rise up through the top. And what we've always seen on every store ever, any kind of statistics about anything related to any games, is that it always follows a power curve where the top things get fuckloads of traffic. You just go down like three spots and they have like half as much traffic, and you like, it just drops so fucking fast. So it's, if you're not first, you're last kind of a scenario. And so that's basically the problem is we wanted to make sure we could get towards the top of the listings that were coming out to leverage Nextfest as much as we could.
Mm-hmm. So what was interesting about that then is that part of our target and part of our goal was to be included in Steam's kind of media roundup. So basically Steam selects a very small subset of the selection of games that are in Nextfest. And so again, like it's a benefit to be in Nextfest anyways, because like Adam said, you're not competing against the whole store anymore. You're competing against about 1,500 titles. If that sounds like a lot, it is, but also no, it's not. Not compared to like the Steam catalog. You know what I mean? The whole fucking catalog. So it's a great already sliced down. And then
it's a regular Tuesday on mobile, you know?
Exactly. So the idea then is that Steam puts together this kind of even more smaller, tightly scoped list that then is a combination of either demos or stuff they're going to include in the trailer that then they send to
the Nextfest trailer.
Yeah, the Nextfest trailer itself. But then the Steam team sends that list to press and demo keys and stuff like that as part of a combination effort of like them. They're promoting the Nextfest, but they're also essentially promoting, you know, the games that are in that really tightly curated list. So part of our target was to get into that list, of course, because it's like, seems like that would be good, right? Be the Steam's kind of cream of the crop signal. So as part of the requirement for that, and part of the reason also why we cut the demo early, released demo early, is that the demo had to be out actually by May 30th.
So before Nextfest started.
Before Nextfest, 10 full days before Netflix started. And this is important. Yeah. This is very important, as we'll come to find in a little bit here. So I want to talk about kind of how the Nextfest has actually gone then for us compared to that ongoing sale that we did kind of leading into the Nextfest. In other words, like what's been the differential for us leading into the Nextfest, how we were positioned going into that, and then how it actually went. So the interesting thing is that Crashlands on that super steep sale,
OG Crashlands.
The super steep sale was 2 weeks long, right? And it included a daily deal for the second week of it. But that includes
a big promotion.
It's a big promotion that includes featuring on the front page for like a day or two, right? Crashlands sold so many units, an astronomical amount of units.
What, a fourth of its lifetime units or something like that?
Basically, yeah. To a degree that we were all like, what? Because it was just sort of, there's a lot.
It's 90% off, you know.
It's almost free.
I mean,
very cheap.
Yeah, we're playing the volume game. Right? Like we wanted as many people to play Crashlands as possible without explicitly giving it away. And that's kind of the goal. So we did that. So I think.
Yeah, what was interesting about that is that our previous daily deal last year that we managed to get, which was a little bit less of a percent of a discount, did, as far as like that day, spiked us up like a tremendous amount on wish lists and stuff, right? But fell off pretty soon, and there wasn't really much to do about it. What was interesting is that, of course,
it just goes away instantly.
Yep. Yeah, it goes away within like 2 days. So what was interesting about this, though, is that the Crashlands sale was, like I said, it was already going for a week before the daily deal happened. And so the daily deal spike itself was actually only like 4x the daily we had been getting up at that point.
Yeah. And I think also it was smaller than the last daily deal.
It was smaller. It was half the size.
But I think it's a combination of probably like we already used up some of the people who would have bought it during that.
Oh, definitely.
I think the bigger thing though is just we were actually in a crowded moment in time where there's a lot happening. There's Fest just leaving.
Summer Games Fest going on.
Summer Games Fest, most importantly, was like right there, right? Mm-hmm. So we actually just had a lot more noise to deal with the timing of that.
Yeah, but so all to say that all of that sort of like that plan of selling units and accumulating wish lists before the next fest happened did work. It actually worked very well. And in fact, riding into the next fest, then I feel like we've gotten like 25 to 30% of our total volume of wish lists for Crashlands 2, which has been on the store now for a year, in the last like 30 days. So we've had a tremendous month of interest in the game, right? Fantastic. And we were given access to like a preview of the Nextfest page about 2 weeks early. And so we could actually see then how it was that Crashlands 2 was ranked, right? Before the fest started.
Yeah, we were
on these
up
big
different lists. Yep.
Yeah, so if you just look at the three major lists, which is essentially top wish list games, daily active demo games, that sort of thing, where are we? And then if you look at subgenres, RPG, open world, whatever, where are we? And we were essentially within the top 20 of basically everything, and especially once you get in the subgenre list, we were in the top 10 always, right? So we're like, great, heading in, feeling real good about this. And the fest itself actually was pretty good. Like we said, the overall wishlist numbers actually did go up, despite the fact that we just had this huge, you were always talking about like where your baseline's at, and then how much better did this do than whatever was happening, yesterday before the fest. And it did quite a bit, did do well.
And it was different demographics, because leading into that, by far our biggest group for that huge sale and stuff was our Chinese audience.
Yeah.
And then coming to Nextfest, that kind of switched over and became more US and other markets. Mm-hmm. So that was the other cool thing about it, is that we can see how different things reach different subsets of our market.
And it's really just down to like currency exchanges and buying power and stuff, where like China is more price sensitive than the US. And so if we had a big number of wish lists chilling for Crashlands in China, then when we do our 90% discount, then suddenly we just get this huge influx of Chinese players because we hit some price point that worked really well for them, that other people weren't waiting for that steep of a discount in different countries, right? So
the next fest starts rolling, and Crashlands 2 is actually put in that Steam. We were selected for the media thing, and we were put in the Steam Nextfest trailer. So if you watch that, there's this clip basically when they're saying like, do you want to play like a great RPG? And then it's Crashlands 2, which is honestly is probably the best. Like, it's hard being in one of those montage sequences because usually it's like 5 seconds of game. Yeah. It's like how much does this matter? But as far as like all of the ones that we've ever managed to get into, that one felt like the best overall positioned, where they weren't just like talking.
It could be, given the context of it being a montage of 3 to 5 second little mini clips,
Yeah, because in the past, typically they're just talking about the event and you're sort of like background noise, right?
Yeah.
But they actually were literally like, do you want to play a really good RPG? And then it was like Crashlands 2. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And again, we got put out on the list with the usual stuff with all whatever their press outreach was. And what I think was interesting though, and the wrinkle that I mentioned earlier, is that in order to participate and try to get into that media selection, we did launch the demo early. And of course, we launched it even earlier ourselves in preparation for that, to make sure that by the time
it had to be May 30, right, for the press stuff. And because it had to be then anyway, and we saw this other event, the Crafting Fest, we're like, oh, well, we might as well have it for that too, which meant we also wanted to give ourselves a few days ahead of that. Yep. To make sure we could work out any kinks in the demo and stuff.
Yep. The thought being that the most important stuff would be, once that May 30th deadline arrives, once press gets a hold of it, the thing needs to be airtight. So if we had any dumb problems, we could knock them out. So the wrinkle, though, is that one of the most important charts on the Steam Nextfest is the top demos played. And this is one of those 3 big charts in the list that basically shows essentially how many like daily active players of your game there are. So the thing we did not expect was that
our soft launch went kind of hard, actually.
Yeah, our soft launch went a little hard. We had a huge pent up interest in Crashlands 2 that basically consumed, again, it's like a 2-hour demo. So it sort of consumed within 2 days or so.
And it must have been the case that, and I don't know if this is what happened, but I know that like if your game goes on sale or things like that, and you have a wish list, and you have the game wish listed, then Steam sends out emails and says, hey, this game on your wish list is on sale. I'm assuming that when we launched the demo, that Steam sent out an email about the fact that, hey, this game on your wish list has a demo or something.
I don't think they did, because it was mostly our Chinese audience. And we have a company that we're working with to help us do the outreach to streamers and stuff there, who kind of manages our social media in the Chinese market. And they've been doing a good job of putting stuff out, including they had announced when the date was. They had videos go out, and we already had a huge volume of people in that market, who were basically just knew about the launch date of the trailer and were basically waiting for it. And so this is
hear about some people who like took PTO for the day the demo was coming out.
Yeah. Which is cool shit, right? I mean,
which is amazing.
But so the wrinkle then was that, I mean, you can look at if you look at like the Crashlands 2 demo on SteamDB, you can see concurrent player count kind of estimations that come from Steam itself. So I think on the day of the demo release, we had like 1,200 concurrent players, which is a lot. Like a lot of, so concurrency is
for a demo.
is just a lot. And so what was interesting about that then is that, of course, we didn't realize that was kind of how that was going to pan out, right? That you get that peak then. In combo with the way that the fest worked for the Open World Fest was that demo-oriented chart, which was present for Open World Crafting Fest, was related to peak concurrency for your demo.
Peak.
The peak ever for your demo.
Not current.
Yes.
Concurrent players, peak concurrent players.
And so when we had seen that, we were like, oh, okay. So maybe the fact that like we had 1,200 people play that, then maybe they changed how this is going to work for this upcoming Next Fest, which would be in our favor because that's a huge concurrent peak and you're just not going to get that again, unless somehow you drive a tremendous amount of attention. So the wrinkly bit basically is that top demos thing is not based on all-time peak. In the case of the Next Fest, it's actually just, I guess, daily. It might be hourly.
It's current players in effect in some fashion or another. But
it
turns over basically.
Yeah. So we went from, I think we were really well positioned on the demo side. I think we were like number 6 on the demo side preview, like up until the Next Fest started, and then it rapidly fell off down. Right? Yeah. Below the fold again, and so
because so many of the people who were like pent up waiting to play our demo already did.
Exactly.
And the thing is. And something else that's kind of interesting, and we were talking about how this kind of reminded us of going to conventions, where like we'd go to a convention and there would be a couch co-op sort of like brawler style game or something. And those always draw a huge crowd at a convention because you're there with a group of friends and it's something for all of you to do together. And also it's like a simple game that you can just pick up and play and it's action packed and all that stuff.
It's better shaped for that environment.
Yeah, and it just draws so much attention at a convention. But then when you put a couch co-op simple brawler kind of a game up on Steam, people don't really buy it.
Yeah,
right?
Convention performance is basically completely disconnected from.
It's just uncorrelated. Yeah. And so something we're kind of seeing with the yes, like with the demos in the Next Fest, if it's based on daily concurrent players, then certain genres of game or even like styles of demo are going to just bubble to the top of that, which is demos or game styles that have lots of replay value, even in a limited capacity, right?
So it's your
with Crashlands 2
multiplayer stuff.
Yeah, so with Crashlands 2, we're kind of optimizing for like the replay value will come from like different game modes and stuff like that, but also it doesn't need a ton of replay because it's a big game that you could just play for dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, which will be reflected in the concurrent players once the game releases.
Yeah, but
the demo ends, right? And so if people played the demo 2 weeks ago, they're probably not still going to be playing it now.
Nope. Yeah, kind of weird,
right? Man. Like they've seen the stuff in the demo, and so if it was a roguelike where you can potentially play that demo for like 10 hours or something, then yeah, it's going to fly up the charts on Next Fest. So again, it's like whatever the algorithm says matters for this particular event is going to change the tenor of kind of like styles of games that move up the thing, which who knows how that's going to correlate to what actually happens when each of these games launches.
Yeah, it definitely does correlate, but it's not a full easy like, oh, you were in the top 10 during Next Fest for demos, like you're going to sell better than the next 10, right? It's not that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those like if you perform really well, then you'll probably also perform well. But when it comes to like the relative meaning of that compared to the things you're being compared against in the different contexts, that's where basically it all comes apart.
Yeah.
So things that are in the top of like Next Fest will probably also most of the time do all right at launch time.
They'll probably do pretty good.
As in they'll probably do better than the stuff that's at the bottom.
Yeah, I would say anything in the genre that they're competing in. Like they're going to do better than anything else, right? Which is a good sign. But I think the thing and the caution, kind of the lesson for me, and I think for kind of our Next Fest participation generally, it's kind of the same as it was, but for some reason I didn't see it this time, which is like that value of like potentially getting press, right?
Yeah, that fucking carrot that's always dangled in front of us of like, well, there's going to be press there. There's going to be streamers there. There's going to be whatever, you know?
Yeah. Versus
has never panned out.
Yeah. Versus the actual value of just like essentially how can we have the store, the algorithm itself? How can
algorithmic exposure? Yeah. It's like 100x difference of like gaming the algorithm versus going for press in terms 100%. of the kinds of outcomes.
Yeah, well, the benefit of the press is supposed to be to help you juice the algorithm by
it's supposed to be. Right? But I think what's fascinating is that like I of course was watching to see if any press has really come out about the Next Fest stuff. And there's only been like a handful of things that's come out so far. The vast majority of them select essentially like 5 to 10 games, you know, somewhat arbitrarily, but typically from that kind of top group. And again, like Crashlands actually still sits really well in the overall Next Fest thing. Like we're generally like in the top like 40 for all of the stuff, right? Yeah. Most wish lists,
which is like out of 2,000 or whatever, pretty solid. You know, it's nothing to
pretty damn good. But it's the sort of thing where, you know,
it's a power curve, right? So
it's a power curve. Yeah. So when we looked at top, and again, you could just see this stuff. You look on SteamDB, the game Once Human, which was like the very top demo played, had like 17,000 concurrent players, right? You skip 5 ranks down, and there was one called Dungeon Crawler, which was like a little cool roguelike game by Strafon. And that one had 1,700, right? That's 5 spots.
10x difference.
10x 5. So again, like the fall off on this stuff is huge. But that also means that basically once you get beyond like 20 or so, you're in like these kind of easier gradations where, you know, if you move up, if you get like an extra, I don't know, 20 concurrent players, you'll bump a rank or 2, you know what I mean? For like kind of where we're at. So, but we settled in a nice spot there. And even so, though, I think what was interesting is that one, just to me, like there was like a general lack of press, at least during the event. I'm curious how this will shape up in the next week or so, because typically there's like kind of, you know, post-event roundups. But so not even just talking about like, did we even get selected for press, but just like, did press talk about anything? I kind of know.
Were there AAA games in Next Fest that you saw, really?
There's always, I mean, there's really high-quality stuff. It's like, I mean, The Altars is in there, and there's all sorts of stuff it's
predominantly indie.
Like, yeah, that's the thing. My take on press, and this is true of like YouTubers, anybody in the attention economy, right? They don't talk about something unless people are already talking about it. Like they only want to comment on things that people will be seeking out articles for. Like this. All right. So this is just a really stupid example. I learned a while back that like back in like the days of gaming SEO, search engine optimization, for like when we're kind of transitioning into the internet for news and press and stuff like that, away from, you know, newspapers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Somebody from, I can't remember which newspaper, but they were like getting their, I think it was maybe like Huffington Post or something. They were kind of getting their online presence established, and they realized that on the day of the Super Bowl, the number one most Googled thing is, what time is the Super Bowl? And so they realized that they could get fuckloads of traffic if they just made an article called if they made an article called "What time's the Super Bowl?" and then the article just says what time the Super Bowl is.
But after you get through a few paragraphs and ads, then you see what time.
Yeah. And so it's like, are they presenting you with useful stuff that you couldn't have easily figured out yourself? No, it's just they realized what people were already wanting to see and just positioned themselves to talk about that thing, right? So it's like,
which isn't inherently
any
bad,
press,
right?
Because it's not inherently bad. It's just how it works. You know?
Well, I think it's the important note about like, as an indie, you can think that, oh, you know, press or YouTubers or whatever else, like part of what their shtick is, and you'll see them.
They're influencers.
Yeah, they're influencers. You see this oftentimes is that they'll say that they're trying to like uncover stuff for their audience, right? Like, we're going to be here first. We're going to like, you know, cover new things. The reality is, like, if you look at the vast majority of like the most successful ones of these, is that they're typically more so like a fast follow on a success. Like a thing has already been doing well, and then
they're actually the success direction is the other way around, right?
Yeah.
If you're a streamer playing a top AAA title, you didn't make that drop. Yeah,
It's like buying a stock. They want to invest in something that they think is valuable but undervalued by the public, right? Yes. So like if they get one of the first articles about, oh, here's some great new builds in Baldur's Gate 3. Mm-hmm. Like if they launch that article like 2 days after Baldur's Gate 3 launched, then that article gets fuckloads of views, right? Mm-hmm. But it's that like they saw that people were getting hyped about this thing and it was starting to surge. And so they raced to like capitalize on it, not to make it successful.
Which is also why it's a brutal job, right? Is because now what you're trying to do is like be the first one to provide the thing that the people will be looking for, right?
It's just a race. It's always a race.
It's a race. And so this is why like as a job, being an influencer in this kind of space, being in press, being like is brutal, grueling, very hard work because the algorithm that you're trying to please is either Google search or Twitch or YouTube. Like one of these other algorithms, right? That are basically giving people what they're looking for. And then you're trying to sell ad clicks, right? And so that's not a space where there's discovery any incentive aligned for discovery of new stuff that people are not already looking for.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's what I thought was so interesting. So you look at and I think part of it was I thought that, given that it was Steam promoting this kind of participation in the media kind of a short list, that I don't know, that there'd be like some kind of like something a little bit of something, but there's just like just nothing. So there's been no news specific to like say Crashlands 2 on like about the demo or anything like that in any of the sources where you would, I think, kind of look for news about games.
And it's possible that once people get on the other side of the stuff that they're in a race for, that they go, dip into the discovery kind of section, right? But unlikely because they're moving on to the next thing where they got to figure out how do we make money doing selling eyeballs,
So the lesson for us was like, oh, okay. So this, I guess it works the same as it did, which is thought that maybe because the platform is the one backing the media aspect, then it would have some more heft to it.
But and that we had been selected into it.
Yeah, probably not. So better to, in our case at least, I think for our next round, should we do another one of these fests in the future, which I imagine we will.
Who knows what these will look like for Crashlands 3.
Yeah, but if they look roughly the same, which they probably will, then Steam comes knocking. They're like, hey, we want to include you in some of this stuff, but you got to publish a demo early. I'm going to be like, no. I'm publishing my demo the day of.
Yep.
Also, I heard all of our listeners' ears perk up. This isn't an official announcement of Crashlands 3, by the way.
Yeah. Who knows what happens after Crashlands 3?
That's a hypothetical future game.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we'll probably launch a game on Steam at some point in the next 10 years.
Probably.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But maybe
someone will.
It's possible we're going to pivot to fully new IP only on mobile and never touch Crashlands franchise again.
Well,
we're just going straight into Unreal Engine-based zombie shooters. That's kind of where we're headed.
But extraction shooter, let's go. But I do want to clarify that, like, again, our takeaway from this is definitely based on kind of where we sit in this overall kind of hierarchy of interests and stuff, right? We're not making necessarily a game that is like super specifically meant to be like 100% for your broadest Steam audience specifically, if that makes sense. As in, like, it's not a multiplayer thing, it's not 3D, etc. So I don't want to necessarily say that the takeaway is generalizable to everybody. It's very much our takeaway as far as recognizing.
We did the best that we thought would make sense for the game that we have and the position that our game is in the market,
Because again, I think if we're one of those ones that is at the end of the day that ends up like, at the very top of these lists, then does participation in the media thing help? Maybe, but also probably you didn't need it anyways.
Probably not. Yeah. You're already at the top of the list. Like what, if somebody writes an article about a game that currently has 20,000 concurrent players on a demo, it's like, is that article that gets 1,000 viewers, which has a funnel of 1% click through to the page? Like, is that going to do it?
And this is what we've said this for years and years, is the most powerful thing you can ever get to happen is get top store featuring treatment of some form, depending on what the store is and how all that stuff works, right? But there's everything else is nothing compared to that. With
you want to be
the extremely rare exception of the literal biggest YouTubers on the planet who can make a game, right? But those stories there's like one of those every few years now, like that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, but I don't want to be like, I don't know, nihilistic about it in a sense, like nothing matters. Because what we always say internally is basically that everything matters in this context. Like every little
just together.
Yeah. So it's like every little, inch that you manage to claw your way forward on this stuff matters because it does roll up. It does roll up in these.
The point is though, is to make sure when you're making decisions between things, because you frequently have to, right? That you got to make sure you're optimizing for the thing that is actually the most powerful, and that is always the stored algorithms, always. Yep. And so if something is going to risk that, if you do the other thing, then it's probably not the move. It's probably not that thing. I mean, like Sam said, context matters a lot. Every game is different. Games audiences are different. There's so many things that go into this that it's not, we can't end up with a hard, fast rule that just like, don't, right?
And again, we decided to for the demo launch because it seemed like maybe that would be good, right? So we're going into it with the same idea of how to maximize this stuff, and depending on the circumstance, it might be like, ooh, this seems like it'd be good, and then hindsight, maybe not, but ideally you're thinking about it.
But the only reason at all that we're even like thinking about it in this way is because the one piece we didn't expect was that when we put the demo up, it would get a huge spike in traffic that was much bigger than anything that we could get unless we were basically like in the top spots on Nextfest. Like that could have put us above that, but we needed to already have that right, like during Nextfest to have that. So basically the one thing here is that if we had actually launched the demo on day one of Nextfest and still gotten that huge spike of traffic, that may have been, but also may not have been, enough to put us in the top, like the actual top slots, right?
Well,
had that happened, that may have put us into the positive feedback loop of getting to kind of stay up there and get fuckloads of wish lists.
The thing is, we know that it would have put us into like essentially the number 6 slot on that top demos page for like a
based
day.
on the current user.
Yeah,
for
the
first
day. Would it matter?
Yeah, what happens after that?
Yeah, because the game itself also matters a lot, right? Because then do people go get the demo and then play the demo, or do they just get it? Do they get the demo and play it a bunch? Do they wish list it after they get it? Like what are all the things that happen? Because that's 2 games with otherwise the same placement and apparent numbers, right?
Yeah,
won't behave in the same way, and Steam does take all that stuff into account. So, which is all to say, like in retrospect, that's what we know now. I think that's the thing we should have done, but that doesn't mean that actually would have turned out to be the better choice, right? Because we don't know. We don't know what the outcome would have been had we done it that way. But our best guess, based on how we understand all of these systems, and then seeing what happened with this thing, is that
it may have panned out
that would have
at least for a day or two. At least for a day or two. Yeah.
Well, at least it might have been different, maybe, or not.
Honestly, hard to say.
We have no idea.
Yep.
It's the most frustrating thing about all this is that you just don't get answers. You never get to have them. It's a recurring theme,
You have to choose your path, and then you just look backward and be like, that was the thing.
Yeah, well, that is what happened, I think. I mean, based on what I know, I don't know much else, though. Don't know whether there's a different path or whether who knows? There's no way to know. Yeah, that kind of makes me think of like even with certain genres of game, like I've always been trying to find a cool sort of like RTS game because people just don't really make them much anymore.
Yeah, I haven't played RTS for a long time.
Yeah, or a game like Stellaris, which is like just really great 4X game, right? I would never play a demo for a game like that. Yeah. You need hours just to like get a sense of it's kind of an investment, right? And then I was also thinking about how Baldur's Gate is such a weird anomaly to me because it was in early access for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And nobody was talking about it.
I remember Sure played it the first week it was out, and he was like, "It's like pretty good."
It's pretty good. And I think it was pretty good. It was an early access, and it was half done, right? And also, it's a story game, and it takes a certain type of person to jump into early access for a story game, knowing that the story's going to change, the story's going to run out. They're going to have all kinds of half-finished broken quests that they can't do, right? Like we've had this conversation internally about whether we should do early access for Crashlands 2, and we always landed on absolutely not, because what if we change the storyline, or what if we need to retroactively redo a quest, and then suddenly everybody who's played it up to this point now has to go back and do those new quests that we like, it's like it's so complicated.
And also the
confusing.
idea that like when people are playing these kinds of games, given that at launch they likely need to start over. Like that's going to be the best experience, right? But now you're relying on that subset of people who like got the game, played it, liked it enough that they want to keep playing it, but also so much that they're willing to replay the first X hours of the game to have the full experience, right? Like, and I had this, there have been titles that's happened with me, that weren't even necessarily story titles, but like there were games that I liked a lot that I played in early access that at the time I was like, oh man, I really want to play this, like see what this is like when it's done, But then when it came out, I was like, oh, but I
got to redo everything.
I got to redo so much stuff, Yeah. And so if you're trying to get back to like the store algorithm roll up problem, right? If you're trying to have like, I want my launch day to be explosive, but you already have a huge chunk of your possible audience is already there, but they're not going to come back, That's weird.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because the weird thing about then, like with Baldur's Gate, was it was performing at a level where like they tried to get into Microsoft's Xbox Game Pass.
Oh, I love that fucking line that they
and what did they were like? They were like at most
Stadia RPG was the fucking Excel spreadsheet line that they put in there. I was like.
And they were like,
was there a leak for that? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. There was a leak where they were evaluating, and they were, I think it was something like at best they were gonna try to like offer them like $6 million,
I think
$3 million, something like that, to bring Baldur's Gate 3 into Xbox Game Pass, which the game made like 200 or 300 times that amount of money. Just on Steam.
Yeah. And how much did it cost to make?
An insane amount.
Yeah, it's like 400 people over 7 years. Like it costs tens and tens of millions of dollars.
$3 million sounds like a lot until you put it in the full context of what it is for a game of that scale. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that was, and the thing is like the team at Microsoft who's doing this stuff in their initial like investigations, it's all about the numbers. Mm-hmm. Right, like they may have somebody
rate of the early access. I'm sure they
they did
Steam data and
and it's like, hey, well, it's not really doing that well in early access, or rather, like it's not doing well enough for us to offer much. Yeah. Right.
Well, that's actually an important point too, right? Because something that we talk about too with respect to early access is until a game is launched, nobody knows any numbers, right? And so you get to play this game of like, it's all about the what ifs and it's all about FOMO when you're talking to business partners and publishers and stuff, right? Because you don't know the numbers. There aren't any, right? So like everyone's just like, what does the game seem like? And you're just like, gamble. And there's so it's a gamble there. But if you do something like early access, now there are numbers. Right. Mm-hmm. And if those numbers look good, according to whatever somebody thinks looks good, because that's also kind of arbitrary, right? But if they look good, then, hey, that helps you sell your game now. And so that actually might put you in a better position than you would have been. But if they don't look good,
well, I would say it's actually
it puts you in a worse position,
If it's anything other than an absolute blowout in early access.
Yeah, that it's probably harmful for your prospects.
It's not that it's harmful so much as that you have to be very conscientious when you're sharing that data to shape the narrative around it effectively and make sure that the people you're talking to actually understand it, right? Which we had with like Levelhead. We were in early access before we did some of our deals and stuff, and for the most part, people I think they're cognizant of the difference between an early access audience.
That you can't really extrapolate early access numbers to launch numbers.
Yeah.
Like Adam was saying though, unless they're really big, like,
well, that's
right? So like if a game is already doing super well and is selling tens of thousands of copies a week or something in early access, then at that point,
it's going to do really well at launch.
It's fine. It's going to do fine unless they do something insane. Like when they launch it, they patch it in a bunch of ways that just fuck the whole game up.
I would love to see any case study about a game that was killing it in early access that then bombed at launch. I haven't heard of that, but there's an example of everything. So I'd love to see, what that case
I think there's a lot of games that did well enough in early access and then the devs couldn't finish the game.
Yep.
And so
they just decided not.
Yeah, or they're just like,
well, we just have infinite free money now, so we'll just hang out.
It's like Gmail being in beta for 15 years, whatever the fuck.
Yeah. So I think it's all this stuff is it's fun to think about, and that's kind of strategically we did a lot of trying to figure out how to roll this thing up to make it so that the next while until launch comes is very fruitful for us on that wish listing side and all that. So we'll be able to report on that in like a month, 2 months or something like that, because we don't have any events coming up, and see kind of what's really happened in the long tail. Did the interest that we get from this huge amount of wish list activity in the last month, has that put us in some interesting position where we actually
and with the demo still up, because
we'll leave it up for a bit.
We're going to take it down at some point before launch because we want to make sure there's some breathing room, in between. But that might be a month before launch. It might be
we'll make ribbit a little bit. I don't know. Bring it back little event or something. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? So yeah, but we plan to have it still up at least for a bit. So we'll also try to get a sense, because like I'm coming into all of this, my assumption has always been that like I just don't think demos do anything. The reason we did it is so that we could participate in Nextfest, right? And but also it did provide a really powerful way for the people who were already waiting for the game to get to go like get a taste of it, and then as part of that process go ahead and wishlist if they hadn't already and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think it actually, so I've changed my mind a little bit about it, which is that given that you're trying to juice all of the numbers, right? Like that's what you're trying to do as you're leading up to a launch, that I don't think a demo is particularly good at selling a game to new people. But I think it gives something to existing fans to
it's just another tool in your toolbox.
It's just another tool in the toolbox. And then it
juice
lets you participate in things like Steam Nextfest and stuff, right?
Which
it probably doesn't do nothing. It probably like adds a little bit, you know, to the tail, but they're really costly to deal with.
Yeah, I think it can inform a bunch of stuff, and also it lets you do like essentially a fake early access in a way of like getting, if you cut it right, of like getting good feedback. Right, we got a lot of good feedback that we were.
Yeah. There are other reasons to do it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I think I'll just say that the Nextfest still, again with all those caveats, has been worth it for us in terms of the overall effect. It's been very good. We're now at a spot where we've blown past our initial goal for how many wish lists we wanted to have by the time the launch rolled around. So we were over that hump. So that feels nice. We're just going to move
we're
the
like
goalpost
40% past that hump at this point.
Yeah, we're nicely over that hump at this point, which is nice.
So we've moved our goal of how many wish lists we wanted to have by launch. We've doubled that goal now because we've blown past the initial goal. so that's, I mean, whatever we've been doing, it's
something's working.
It's doing something.
Yeah, but the point is, it's been all of it, right? It's been a lot of
it.
Stuff.
Yep. So overall, it's been educational. We don't know if any of this knowledge or what we think is knowledge will apply the next time
to anybody else now or to us in the future.
Yeah. But hey, this is just what happened. So
take it or leave
that's the best we can say. You guys want to try to squeeze in one question before we wrap it up? All right. So the highest upvoted question from podcast.bscotch.net comes from Challosis, who says, what was the most fun feature to implement for Crashlands 2? What was the least fun?
Oh, I'm trying to think about like the core system stuff. You know,
and what does it mean for it to be fun to implement a feature? Because like the feature itself might be really fun, but implementing it might be tedious, or
it sounds like it's about kind of I would think of it as like when you were going to go like design and, because I think of this was part of the same puzzle, design and implement. Which ones just brought you fucking dread, right? Versus it being like, oh, actually, this is like kind of a decent time, to like actually get it fully designed with the context of the game in mind.
I have
and
a
then
suspicion
get it in there.
about this, but yes, that's good.
What's your suspicion? I don't know.
Well, the interesting thing about the question is that there's a time problem here, which is that generally speaking, very large systemic features are almost inherently really annoying to build.
Yeah.
No matter how excited you are about it. So for me, it's like, build mode is the one that comes to mind because that took, I think, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks to figure out how.
Not build mode, just buildings.
Yeah, buildings.
Just buildings, yeah.
How can we put roofs on these fucking buildings? That was a big question. How does
a room know it's a room? Yeah,
all this stuff. And there are also like little algorithmic holes in that kept showing up later as we leveraged that system to do other stuff like the comforts and things like that. So I think basically large foundational like systems that are themselves features are like generally going to be kind of on the that was annoying to implement list. You know what I mean? I feel like just a general rule.
So I would actually, to me, it's a combination of what goes in and what comes out in terms of like the fun of it. Because if something is hard to do, but then as you get toward the tail end of it, it's like really cool, then it's super fun, right? Versus things that are like really hard to do and take a long time. And then afterwards, it's also like you can't. It makes everything better somehow.
Yeah.
You need to have it,
so
but
for
no one's
me,
gonna notice or give a shit, basically.
Yeah. So for me, weirdly, like the least fun thing to implement was the game changer. because it was 6 freaking months of just being siloed working on this tool and not really knowing whether it was going to do what we needed it to do until everybody started using it, which meant until it was done.
Yep.
And so it was just kind of being in this cave, just hoping that the things that I was doing were going to be useful and worthwhile. And afterwards, it was very cool to see and like continue to work on and stuff like that. But it was very different from the buildings, which actually was what I was going to say was the most fun thing to implement, weirdly. Okay. Because the buildings was like, it starts with a simple demand that ends up being weirdly interesting.
Yeah,
right?
It's a cool set of problems, definitely.
Yeah, because in the first Crashlands, you had quote walls and doors, but no roofs, and also
walls are just things you can't walk through, and doors are just things
obstacles.
That have a state where you can't walk through them, and another state where you can. But there's no such thing as a room, and then floors are just a thing you have to put down to put a station on top of it. But like, a floor doesn't know it's next to another floor, doesn't know if it's in a room, all that stuff.
Yeah. So what ended up happening with the buildings was this series of interesting problems that created interesting questions, which then opened up even more game systems, which was really cool. Because basically what happened with the buildings was all we cared about was roofs. We got a lot of, not a lot, but like there was some comments in the press around the time we launched the first Crashlands where people were like, I mean, technically this game is claiming that I can build a base or like a house, but it's just like an open air bunch of obstacles, right? And we were like, we want actual houses. We want it to feel like you're building a home in the wilderness, which means roofs
are required.
Roofs. And then Sam in particular was pushing for this idea of like structural integrity. Like we've been playing some Valheim, I think, before that, where it was like you actually had to build game. Yeah, you had to build like supports and stuff, and they could only hold up so much weight and all that, and so you couldn't just build an insane structure that just like went up to space at a 45-degree angle. Like things had to actually be structurally sound in some way.
And I like that because of the kind of anchoring it does, where it's like it makes things very real feeling.
It's like a little puzzle.
Yeah, a little puzzle.
It's not just like every wall is just interchangeable with every other wall, and who cares? It's like you got to think about how many walls you want, how many pillars you want, stuff like that. And so there's just a bunch of weird questions about how do you even think about structural support? How do you think about like what happens if I pick up a wall that's supporting other walls in build mode, right? What do you do there? But then once we had the ability to place those things, then we just kind of hit this wall, which is just like, okay, I've made what to me as a human is obviously a room.
So clearly a room, right? Just
how the fuck does the computer know that that's a room and to put a roof on it? And so then like that was an easy problem to solve, except the calculation to answer that question was really expensive, and the game would just hang for like 2 seconds every time you complete
really
the building.
Anywhere could be a room, right?
Anywhere in the whole freaking world.
Because also there's an important distinction, right? Between like if you're making stuff for a developer to use, you can be like, oh, I'll just make a tool where you can just like say this. You can just like drag it on the tiles and say this is a room or whatever, right? But if players need to be able to build stuff, then that means a room could be anywhere in any state. And complete. It can change between complete. It can change over time. It can be anywhere on the map where we allow rooms to exist, which means the solutions that you can reach for when you're making stuff for developers to make content is dramatically different than the stuff you have to be able to do to make stuff for players to be able to do.
Yeah.
Make content.
And so that was the first set of problems, which was really interesting trying to figure out how to, in an optimized way, have the game know what a building is, what a room is, and to be able to distinguish between the different rooms of the same building and know that they're part of the same building, but also that they are connected to each other and stuff like that. Because then that opened up, once we had that opened up the next game system, which was the comforts, where you can get benefits for your buddies that stay with you in your home base by basically
by decorating,
By decorating, by putting stuff in their space. So, one of them might say like, oh, like I want some privacy. I don't want to share a room with another person, right? Well, that means that rooms, and again, like you think about this as a human, you're like, that means that the character needs to know who else is in their room, right? No, it means that the room needs to know what's in itself.
Yep.
And then the character can say, I'm in this room. What's in this room? And ask the room what it has. And so the buildings, Yeah, so the buildings and the rooms have this dynamic tallying system where as things come into or out of them, or as you place things in build mode, every room has like a lookup where it has a list of all the things inside of it and a bunch of tallies and counters and stuff like that. And so once we had the buildings, and like buildings are an entity that like know about themselves and they know what rooms they have and the rooms know what's in themselves, then we were able to open up those game systems to make the base building way deeper and take advantage of that, right? So that was one of those, like, it was a set of interesting problems. And even though it took like you're saying, about 6 weeks from start to finish to kind of get all the kinks worked out, it had enough of those intermediate milestones where like things were functional at different points and it was working towards something that kept opening up in cooler and cooler ways. The game changer didn't open up at all until
it was done.
When it was done.
And then we tried to convert stuff for 6 months.
Yeah, and I would agree that in general, that is the worst stuff, is the stuff that you just have to work on until it's done. And it's nothing until you get to that. This is
nothing until it's done.
Yeah, there's all the tools that I make for the team too. You know, it's just like some of them take a few days, some of them take months. And in both cases, like, it's completely useless until it's on the other side of being done. And that's a aggravating kind of experience, you know?
Yeah. Another thing with the game changer was that it needed to get, when I say done, like, it needed to get to a point where it was useful, where it was like, it did what was advertised, you know? But then there was another 6-month period afterwards of transitioning the game into that format,
right? Where there's no change in like what's going on in the game. You're just making it possible to now use this tool and to start scaling things and all that kind of stuff. But the transition period is
not fun.
Nothing. Yeah. So the game changer, like, it sped up a bunch of stuff kind of right out of the gate, but because it still needed so many features and so much integration into what we had already done in the game, it wasn't really until like 6 months after the game changer came online that we
really start seeing
that I would say like that it was just like seamlessly and super fast, just working with everything that we needed, right? So it's amazing to work with now, but the process of creating it,
not fun,
and implementing it was a lot.
I think the probably one for me is actually just on the most basic level, it's just the terrain. And even
is that a good or a bad?
It's
best
to
or
me,
worst
it's actually
thing to work on?
it's both, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So because again, we were talking about like defining a visual and aesthetic identity for your game. Everyone gets real hyper focused on characters, right? But the character is always the smallest thing on the screen. So character is not the biggest fucking thing on the screen, right? And sure, attention wise, like you're going to be looking at it, whatever else. But the world itself, the setting has to work really, really well to make people want it, because that's actually most of what you see in a screenshot, right? It's the world. And so
it has to look good enough to make you want to be there, but also in a particular way that lets you focus on the stuff you're supposed to be focusing on, which is not the world.
It's to look good, but not having many opinions about forcing you to pull your attention onto it.
And also not look too much like other people's stuff, but also not look too weird. So it's like a big needle thread. And so I think what's fun about it is, if anybody's looked at the demo or screenshots or else, the terrain itself is actually, there's like a tile. So let's say the grass, there's an under tile for that same one, which manages then, depending on how the depth sorting works, if you see that or you don't, depending on kind of what it's around. Then there's things called spice that are internal to that, so like little flowers that can appear. Then there's spice that spills outward onto all the other tile types next to that, so that the grass kind of spreads, makes the edges fuzzy as far as how hard the grittiness is. And then
it's
on
all
top
about hiding that grid.
Yeah, and on top of all of that, there's a sunlight dappling layer that is these overlays that are just kind of randomly placed around that add this little bit of color variety into it that make it all actually work. And like figuring that fucking thing out that was
like 2 months.
Oh, that was a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. And like figuring out how the edges of the shore worked. Oh my God. Even just like the water shader, all that stuff. Just a pain in the ass. But like, it's also, like you said, what comes out the other side. It's like, okay, it's very cool. It's a lot of pieces. And even when we make a new biome now, I'm like, but it's, I know that once you get all the pieces in, that it's going to look good, if that makes sense. It's the appropriate number of pieces.
But you also have the problem. The thing that I see you kind of not struggle with the most, but kind of just like butt your head up against the most when working on terrain tiles is the problem of variety, which is that you can't just be like, okay, I want some ice tiles. I'll just make one ice tile and put it into the world and see if it looks good. It's not going to look good because what makes terrain look good. Yeah, what makes terrain look good is a lack of repetition. It should feel organic.
Yeah, that's what makes
should be able to see patterns.
Very challenging to work on. Is basically it's similar to the Game Changer in the sense that you cannot.
You got to make them all.
You got to make them all before you could tell if you did it right, which is not fucking fun.
Yeah. Make 3 different versions of a thing, then you can see whether that was even a good idea to begin with.
Yeah,
you know,
and
but
maybe
also
it was
it's
okay, but you needed
plus
the spice. You know. Yeah, the undertile doesn't work. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, just kill me now. It's one of those.
So it's this big iterative loop where you make 8 different types of tiles, each of which has 3 variations and 3 undertiles to separate it out.
And multiple
then
internal and external spice.
Yeah. Then you look at then you put it all in the world, and we have like this little editor thing that we can use to paint tiles together and stuff like that. And so you can use that to evaluate whether they work well with each other. Because any one tile may look good if you just put it in a big space, but if you put it up against the other tiles, suddenly it doesn't work, either pattern or contrast or color comps or something.
Yep.
You know,
so that's one of those.
And then it
just, oh my God. I mean, there's so many tools. Actually, most of the tools we built on the art side and even a lot of the in-game tools are sort of like really at the heart of it, ways to solve how fucking annoying it is to make an environment tile. From the stitch system that imports all the art to the world editor, all sorts of stuff like that. It's like, oh my God, it's a nightmare. So,
yep. So, but yeah, I will say, I think I stand by kind of what you're saying though, about sometimes the things that are the most fun to work on are also the least fun, just because they're really big problems. Yes. And every now and then when you're trying to solve a big problem, you'll run into this chunk of that problem where it's just wow, this fucking sucks.
I like the result of it, but I do not like doing it. You know what I mean? Very overdoing it. I think as far as my favorite thing, man, probably critters, to be honest, because they got
this is just little guys.
They got nothing going on. It takes me an hour to make one of those bad boys. You know,
make 2 animations at most, or 1
simple animations.
Hop around.
It's not trying to do abilities and time stuff. It's just
they're 12 pixels.
Oh my God, it's the easiest thing on the planet.
Screen real estate.
I love it. That's my favorite.
Yeah,
and
but of course
they just add instantly. They just add dynamic life
charm.
To the world. Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about those is they are actually full-fledged creatures.
Yeah,
in the sense that
they run creature code.
They are creatures. They're just real small.
They could aggro you if you're just deciding not to, you know?
I thought they do aggro you. Isn't that a whole thing we were talking about?
There's a couple of them that do technically have abilities that they can use to attack you. And if you take a hostile action toward them that doesnof do damage, like if you hit them with your spacewalk, which is your pan, your stunning pan. You can
stun a critter, and sometimes they'll react.
Sometimes some of those critters will come at you and they'll hit you for 1 damage or something.
I think it's the glowworm that bites you or some shit, which is very funny.
Yeah, but you know what? Hey, if you pissed off that glowworm, I don't know what to tell you.
You.
I mean,
it's a wild
that's animal. On you. You should have seen that coming.
Yep.
You know, nature's scary sometimes, and don't be one of those people who's taking a selfie with an elk.
Nope.
You know, just
don't be dumb.
You got to respect the glowworms.
Never turn your back on a critter. Never.
That's right. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa Acosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can just go to podcast.bsketch.net, where we have links to the community Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And as always, if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, give Crashlands 2 a wish list, check out the demo, give it a play. And if you want to, you can also send us some feedback about it. There's some buttons in the demo to do that. So all those things help us out and help gear up toward launch, and we'd appreciate it. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.